you say you love middle school? Is that what I
started. Well, oh, here she is. Okay, we're all here, so let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Canyons Board of Education. Today is May 24th, 2022. And we are meeting at the district office located at 9360 South 300 East in Sandy, Utah. And I just want to thank everyone. I realize this is an additional meeting. And so I just kind of wanted to just take a second and review why we're meeting today. So in the March 29th meeting, we had an item discussing the Draper Park schedule. And in that meeting, and I'm just going to read a sentence or two from the minutes of that meeting that says the Board of Education requested a task group be formed to look at the subject more thoroughly and present findings at the board meeting. The board also requested that in light of the difficulty of moving off of a 6-period schedule in time for the 22-23 school year, viable solutions to increase access to arts and electives in the coming school year should be considered by the administration and presented to the board. So at our meeting last week, May 17th, those options were presented to the board. And in that discussion, additional questions came up and members of the board were interested in revisiting that discussion about 6-period, 7-period. And so because there were questions being asked last week that the administration hadn't been prepared to answer, we've scheduled up this meeting to continue that discussion and give the administration an opportunity to provide this additional information that was asked for last week. So with that, and before I turn the time over to Superintendent Robbins, I just want to express our appreciation to the work that has gone in to gathering and providing this information to us and since last week, and remind the board and everyone that we do have a hard stop time at 5 o'clock. So that is on the record now. Hard stop at 5 o'clock. So anyway, with that, Superintendent, I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you for the meeting. And I first just want to start with expressing my gratitude to our administrative staff, especially Cindy Hansen, our middle school director, and Principal Watts that's here with us. And I don't want to embarrass or put Cindy on the spot, but while being out ill, she worked on this project. And as we all know, has been working on this project for a few months now. And so I just want to express my appreciation to her, our school performance team, Dr. Watts and the administration and teachers and staff at Draper Park Middle. And I think I want to lead off with just, first off, we're all here for the right reasons. And I think we all recognize coming out of the pandemic and moving forward that, this need to really provide not just a strong academic curriculum, but also a true holistic approach that really meets the needs of our students. And, if the pandemic has done anything, it's really shown us that this level of engagement that's necessary to really kind of reestablish a baseline and a norm of what's needed for our students to be successful. And nothing is less than the other, and I just think it's important to state that because it's obvious. I think everyone has opinions about what schedule works better than the others. I really believe and know that this is the start to this conversation, and I think this will continue to move the district forward to better serve our students. So I hope no matter what the decision is, the board will take into consideration that there's no wrong answer. There might be an answer that's more timely. There might be some questions and decisions to be made about the what and the how and the when. But I know the why is very solid, and we've spent a lot of time on this. And I think through the strategic vision, it aligns to that and to the discussions that you all had. And so I'm looking forward to this taking the next step. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the slide deck because I think where it's a hard stop, you need the time to ask all the questions that need to be asked and have the discussion yourselves. So I'll get right to it and then turn it back to you, President, for questions. So the two processes that we were looking at from the last board meeting that the board asked for some clarification on, and it's specifically at Draper Park Middle School. So you could almost consider it as kind of a pilot type of situation and that we're in. But the consideration is the one proposal the administration's brought forward is a 0 hour. That would be before or after school. And now that we've set the times for Draper Park, this possibility could move forward. A couple of things with this, just to reiterate, this would be a temporary solution. This is something that we've looked at as a possible stopgap to help with the elective question. And we would be funding this out of ESSER funds, but by no means am I suggesting or proposing this as a permanent solution, but it would give us an opportunity to explore the possibilities of additional electives outside the regular day. So I think also I need to make this clear that this is not a sliding schedule. This is not something that would bump teachers from a different start time and end time, but this would be built outside the regular day. So it would have very little impact on the schedule itself. So you can see the process there, and we can get to questions, so I don't want to spend a lot of time just reading through that, but essentially we would do some type of request through a survey to parents to determine what types of courses. We've spent extensive time on the art survey and other data input from SEC and parents on what electives the school community would like to see happen. That would also include core options in that 0 hour. I think it's also important to point out that in the 0 period hour, there would not be transportation provided. We don't provide that in any other circumstance in the district, nor would we here, but we're assuring that students have the opportunities for that basic curriculum option during the regular school day. So you can kind of see the process there that would be done. Obviously, a couple of things to think about: the availability of teachers as well as the physical space. This would be a right of first refusal to Draper Park teachers to begin with. If we can't fill that, then we would open it to adjunct middle school teachers in the district. Now that also has some problems with it because of travel and whatnot, but we would hope that we would be able to fill those courses. So you can see, what that might look like with registration cards going out and a sign up. We're suggesting or proposing a minimum of 10 students to carry the course for the fall. Now, these would be regular courses. So these would be, there would be attendance and credit and grades given. So it would be considered a regular course. This would not be enrichment, but these would be regular courses. And then you can also see the cost average per teacher per period if authorized to do so. So we would anticipate approximately 4 0-hour teachers. Hopefully that's the level of interest that we would be able to carry. And then again, no transportation would be provided for those courses outside the regular school day. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the timeline of what that might look like for the 6 period and the 7 period day. So I'll just jump to that briefly, maybe not. Can you see it on your screens? How do I go back?
Yeah, it should open.
X out, or what do I do? Go back? It's not letting me go back.
Yeah, not.
We'll come back to that screen. We probably should get to that timeline.
Oh, because you're going to a link?
Yeah.
Yeah, it opened.
You should hear it.
Will that arm work?
Yeah, one on a PDF.
So let's talk a little bit about then the potential consideration to shift to 7 periods. So if we move to 7 periods, it's obvious that there would be additional sections added. So you can see there, and I'll turn some, when we get to the end, Chip's here to specifically talk to this, but essentially what happens is there's more sections created than can be filled. So if that makes sense, right? So once those sections are created, then Chip and his team would build a master board. And with those additional sections, there would be courses that would either have no students in them because of the additional sections or very few. Now you can balance that out a few different ways, right? The idea there, and this came up in the last meeting, to potentially hold those teachers harmless would mean that we would have to backfill those courses with some type of elective if they're certified in that content area. So, that's a bit of a challenge, right? Not that Chip can't make that work, but I've built many master schedules myself, and the more sections you add, it thins out the students across more sections and lowering those, but some are not able to carry as well as others based on what they would teach. And that also may mean that they would have to prep or prepare for that course over the summer. So the district, as you see, traditionally we do transfers once the registration's done and they know what their enrollment will be. That those transfers are typically done in March. So we're a bit behind on that, but that's just the timing of that scenario. So and then you can also see the other option if those were kept, just dispersing, as I mentioned, dispersing those numbers across core teachers. Usually what I've seen over my career is when you do that, you get courses as low as 10, 15 students, which obviously in the funding formula, and Leon could speak to this, but that's not really a sustainable model, right, across the district. So, that's a bit problematic and not something long-term. And so in addition, then in the 7-period day, with those additional sections, in a 7-period day, we would want to pick up 4 additional elective teachers based on the needs that we've already identified, targeting specifically in the arts area is where that would likely go. So you can see there, timeline wise, as you probably noticed in the timeline when you can click on that link, hiring 4 elective teachers at this point is a challenge. I mean, we're beyond the hiring season. There's still teachers out there, but as you know, right now the market is extremely competitive for teachers, and we've been there. We're very competitive in getting the teachers that we need, but it wouldn't be fair to not, suggest that it's a challenge at this point. And you can see the cost on the additional FTE. Usually FTE, Leon, we're running around 80,000 per FTE.
Closer to 90 now with our
Okay.
rising benefits. Yeah.
So that kind of gives you an idea on cost. And then, then Chip would work the board to create the space necessary and balance out number of students, number of seats over that time, and balancing prep periods, teaming, all the things that need to be done to make that possible. And then the final slide, just to kind of back up and feed off of the electives and the potential considerations for what might be done. You can see we added those slides from previous board meetings that demonstrate those survey results on what our parents and students have shared with us as their priorities on electives.
Dr. Robin.
Yes.
Ryan's here to help with.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go back to that timeline, you guys?
Yeah.
That briefly?
Yeah.
This is right here, right?
Then can we also go to that elections or the course?
Am I logging in?
I couldn't access it either.
It's weird because it like repopulated all of my document. That one came up openly. Some PDFs, it's paired and board. Posted separately.
Yeah, and it goes to Google Drive.
Board docs too.
The link, at least it did.
Is it this one?
There's a separate
so it's this
document
one.
on board docs.
Yeah, you can.
Right.
Oh.
Put them both, it's the same thing.
Yeah, the typical.
Okay.
timeline.
Okay, I just want
Okay.
to.
So it's right here.
So you can see the timeline that we have put together. So approximately, when you go through this process, the normal timeline is usually, it's a springtime event, right? So usually the request and registration process starts to occur as early, I've seen as early as January, February, and that usually runs into April. I don't want to speak for Chip or our principals, but one thing that has always been really positive, I think, is that when teachers leave school, they know what they're teaching the next year, and they, teachers are very methodic in how they plan and prepare, and so they want to get on those lesson plans as soon as they can. And so timing wise, that usually is finished up early April, no later than the time school's out. So and then you can kind of see who is responsible for what. I call building the master schedule the war room, because that's really what occurs. And, I'm sure Chip and his team, all of us that have been principals, you have that board up and you want to get as many eyes on it as possible to try to decide, how to balance out the numbers and try to meet as many needs as possible. That's usually a recurring event. It's not a one-time thing. I mean, by the time the schedule gets set and then you allow for changes or teacher to make their requests, it's just this constant evolutionary process to really refine it as you go. So you can kind of see what the traditional process is like, and then you can also see the request for the consideration for 7-period day in the situation we're in. For me, and Chip knows his board better than anyone, but I think on a whole, I would recommend that, this really probably requires a 10-week, process. So I think being conservative would be an additional 40, potentially 40 days over the summer to build this thing. And and that's being conservative. I'm not trying to, inflate anything. Like I've built master schedules myself, and they just take a lot of time. I mean, that's probably one of the most arduous parts of the job that there is, but you want to get it right. It's not something that you want to be hasty about, because one change, it just has such a domino and rippling effect that if you miss on something, it just ripples through the whole schedule and can really cause grief for everybody later. So we've compressed that. You can see kind of the same similar process, but compressed with those responsible for which duties. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I know I rushed through a whole lot of stuff, but I want to give the board enough time to get through all the questions and discussion you need.
Before I turn it over to the board, I just want to see, Cindy and Chip, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think just realizing too that you can see how integral a role that your counselors play in this process. And their contract is over a week after school's out. So you would have to pay them a stipend to get them to stay if they don't already have a summer planned. And I will say too, just the concern with how challenging this year has been to add an additional piece of kind of stressful work for most of the summer on our admin team and on the teachers, because they won't have schedules, and all of that kind of additional stresses complicates their ability to start fresh as well. So That's just one of the key points I would add.
I think the only thing I would add is that I think there's a link at the bottom of this document. Oh, not on this one? Oh, sorry. There should be a link somewhere where you have access to. Oh, okay. Well, I can get you that feedback from teachers. We talked to teachers last week and asked them what challenges, what opportunities, what thoughts they had about the potential change from a 6 to a 7 period schedule for next year. And the year after that, and I got a lot of feedback and great information from them. So I know you've probably heard from a lot of teachers as well, but I hope that you would take that feedback into account.
We're happy to email that to you.
Great, thank you. And just speaking of feedback, because we had a short time frame for this meeting, we didn't invite in-person public comment, but we invited written public comment. So I just want to read and that public comment as part of, to be considered as part of the record of this meeting is written comments that were received by the communications department by noon today, as we stated on the agenda. And you all know we've received a lot of other comment directly by email, but I just wanted to read the names of those patrons that did submit it through the process outlined on the agenda. Cynthia Lloyd, Marion, Noah Durst, Mitchell Entencio, Nancy Butler, and Megan Gebhard. So, and the hard copies will be included with the record of the meeting. So, okay, so board, do you have questions, or do we want to just kind of make some comments? How do you want to handle? We've got an hour.
Start somewhere and go around the table.
Yeah, we do that.
And then go around.
All right.
Around.
So I do have a couple questions, and maybe, I don't know, my thought is maybe if all of us have a chance to ask clarifying questions, and then we
Should
can.
we do that? A round of questions and then a round of comments?
So my questions, as far as the presentation goes, when we are looking at the 0 period options, so when you said that it would be mostly art questions, or are we going to do any course that allows it to populate things like you have more of a ready chance to be able to have kids getting band or orchestra or, Spanish or something, and then they can take their core.
Well, my thinking would be we would put out a survey to parents to request, but my thinking would be based on some of the survey and the data that we've already collected, that it would definitely have an artist focus, but I'm also, I think opening it to core 0 hour would also be a possibility. I don't know, Cindy.
Well, and I think the clarifying piece is that because it's a 0 hour, we have to have teachers willing to teach it, volunteering. So sending a survey and just saying to parents, what do you want? We can't really quickly manage, because they may want things that teachers aren't willing to do. So part of last week's, we had things that teachers had committed to at the school, willing, that they would be interested in doing that. We can reach out more to the core, because that was clear in the last meeting that was something that we wanted to at least offer to see if people would do that. And then, so be able to have kind of a list of these are the things, the classes that we have available. And then if we, find out what parents want, and then you have the other district-based personnel option. But the problem there is timing of them being able to get out of another school's bell schedule and then travel to Draper Park. So,
Well, and the reason I ask in part is because we have significantly more core teachers there at the school. So the likelihood that one of them could, is qualified to teach a core class, that would then free up the kid's schedule to go to the other. Because, my thought is if you send and survey out to a parent with that question, they're not going to understand the implications necessarily of how that works, of how it frees them up to be able to take something during the day they take. So I think it's important for us to take a real look at that. The other question is, we've STEM is a really important priority. I think that needs to really be addressed. And you mentioned that we would do arts for 0 period. Could we have STEM options?
I think in the first,
There was a manufacturing tech
Yeah.
and there was a.
Robotics, I remember.
Robotics.
When this idea was originally presented, I was asked to gauge interest among elective teachers for that 0 period option. And so those are mainly the teachers that I talked to. We did talk in faculty meeting, briefly one meeting about this plan and I let everybody know kind of what the idea was and needed to kind of collect about availability or willingness. We've kind of been waiting for the start time question to be resolved, and that's done now. So we had teachers who had potentially expressed interest in coding, in manufacturing technology, robotics was one of the STEM area that is an option. As far as visual arts, that was an option. Our instrumental music teacher's pretty maxed out right now.
Sure.
Doing jazz band before school, teaching on her prep, and having kids come in after school to help. So she wasn't quite sure how she could make that work. Our vocal music teacher had some ideas. So
Are any of those teachers accredited to be able to teach those other courses in this 0 period?
to teach
To teach some of those other courses? They're
the
accredited.
ones that they
to those?
expressed interest in, yes.
Okay, great.
They pretty much fall in the content area that they're licensed to teach.
So my other question was, as far as registration is concerned, one of the questions I know was, it's going to be really hard to be able to gather information from the kids. I'm just thinking back to whenever I register my kids for middle school, you're able to kind of put down a list of preferences from 1 to 8, And so I think we already have a pretty healthy idea of what the kids are interested in doing. I don't know if it necessarily requires taking it back out to the community. And one of the questions I also had, I reached out to Chip and asked to be able to see the registration cards for each of the respective grades. And I noticed we have certain classes that are kind of more specialized, like we have dance 3, we have like theater 3. I mean, some of those things that don't necessarily have as many kids. I think part of me wonders if in the future, looking forward, if we have less specialization and more kind of broad open options for kids to be able to take, if that will help with the FTE associated with the electives or not. So.
That would be, those classes were created in an effort to give kids more choices, more opportunities in the electives that they take. So we could certainly look at simplifying that schedule.
And I'm thinking that partially to open it up to STEM options.
That would reduce some of the options that are available to students, and that is, from what I understand, previous to when I arrived at Draper Park, providing more options and more choice was a big priority for the community. So I guess we need to find a balance.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And a lot of, sorry.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Say a lot of times those specialty classes, really, that's where our 8th graders go, who've taken lots of levels of different courses and have already kind of exhausted their choices, but they love art or they love music, so they have that higher level to go to. So it's hard if again, that balance, but sometimes when you remove those, they don't have anything left they want to take.
Is that typical in all of the middle schools to have those kind of special, like, I'm just thinking to free up options for some of the other priorities maybe.
Yeah, I think a lot of them do have, depending on their community, some have the advanced dance. Some of the middle schools don't really have dance. It depends on their facilities. Some have an advanced PE or I know at Mount Jordan, we had some advanced art. So it kind of depended on where their teachers and what programs they had built for those advancements and where the community interest lie. But that's where a lot of our 8th graders go. And so it's problematic if they don't have other options by the time they're there, then they're like, I don't want to take anything. So that's kind of where that fits. So we'd have to find that balance.
Unless there's something different that hasn't been
Yes.
offered before, right?
Yes.
Those are my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Steinbauer?
The first time that I heard about the 0 period idea was actually in a discussion with Dr. Kathy Bittner last year. And I think that when we first started looking at the zero period, it was before, as Chip said, it was before we knew what the bell schedule was going to look like. We had hired Edgelog, we were looking at possibly 8, maybe 8:15, maybe 8:30. And so at that point, to me, the zero period made some sense because I thought a lot of families that are accustomed to going to Draper Park at 7:30 in the morning would maybe be amenable to be going earlier. But where we've just done a 20-minute change, I've put a lot of feelers out to the community. And the feedback I have received is I don't have any families that say they would take advantage of a class before school. There are families that are currently doing that with the music program, but they said they would continue to do that with the music program. So my largest concern is how many families would really take advantage of this? And I know the families I reached out to after school, they have practice and things like that. Is that a concern for you as the principal? From what you've gathered, when you've talked about the zero period, I mean, do you have an idea what the level of interest would be for those after school hours or?
In terms of students? and
Yeah,
families,
as terms as families
we haven't
taking
even-
advantage.
We haven't even put any information out to the community.
Okay.
About these options because we've been sort of just working through these discussions at the district level.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's not something on my end that I've even advertised or
Sure.
shared, not having specifics or information.
Sure. Kind of hard to open up that can if you're not sure if you're even offering it or not.
So we have to start there, I think. I think, Amber, I think maybe you brought this up at the last meeting at Butler, is, gauging the interest in the
Yes.
community for kids to even take an after-school or a before-school class. Would there be enough interest to
Yes.
justify then offering, and there may be, I don't know, and I think that's what we want to learn
Right.
first, is giving them the information about here's what we do, here's what that looks like,
Right.
who wants to take advantage.
Right, and from all the people that I've communicated with, email, phone calls, and in person, I think there is a large level of interest for more elective options and different schedule options from some of the population. However, I didn't find any that were really excited about a before or after school. So
Believe that.
that's all for now. And just move on to the other thing.
All right.
Who wants to be next? Steve?
No questions.
Okay, just a couple. It sounds like in the short minute of time, we have a couple of decisions we need to make.
Yeah.
The first decision was we were just going to decide whether or not we were going to go to 7th period coming this next year.
Mhm.
The second decision we need to decide is if we're going to go to 0 period and what that may look like.
Mhm.
The third decision is if we're going to go to Draper Park for 7th period next year, or do we want to go ahead and put it in some kind of a study mode and give some time rather than making a decision tonight as to whether the 6 or 7 period, maybe give it a time limit
Mhm.
on when we ought to do that. And it's probably the things we need to address that in that order, because I think that was the issue we're getting emails on. Whether or not we're going next year and the ramifications of that. And we've heard a little bit about the ramifications. Feasibly on a 7 period, can you even do that with your building and the number of kids you have in there? Or you'd have teachers on carts? I mean, we have so many kids in that school. I don't think you don't have a classroom in the restrooms.
The entire building is full. We don't have any empty classrooms. We have some smaller classes being taught in creative spaces. I guess I'll say
Little
it that way.
boxes.
With offering more electives, if we have a bunch more kids sign up for band or orchestra, for example, and we go from one teacher to 1.5, I don't have anywhere to put another band or orchestra class. All of our art rooms, the fax room, kind of those specialized elective spaces are full. So there would be some concern about housing in classes like that. Well, just generally, I guess, because we don't have a lot of extra room.
Okay, so that sort of answers a lot of the different questions. I mean, one of the major issues that sort of brought this to the fire was that our music programs are dying up Corner Canyon and several other. 6th graders next year need to have that opportunity, or maybe the choir people also need to have that opportunity. Would we be able to have, and I think we talked about it last time, some actual core after, so that they may be able to take an extra course and take that choir during the day, or whatever, and handle that. Because the program as it is right now is not sustainable for the Corner Canyons. Corner Canyons has stellar programs and everything. We have a stellar music program, but we don't have enough football players on the field to play. And you can't play a game unless you do that. And that's what we're starting to see as we go to competitions. We don't have half the number or a quarter of the number of anybody else showing up because we don't have the kids. And that starts at the 6th grade. So as we look at this, we need to try to figure out, is there a solution if we go to 0 period that we can offer those to sort of, if we don't go to 7th period, at least get something to make it, we're not putting it off for another whole year. Because that seems to be critical with the Corner Canyons music programs and maybe even their choir programs. Choir is a little different. You can pick that up easier than an instrument. You'd have to pick that up earlier. But you can. We don't have instrument programs in the elementaries. In many cases, we have orchestra, but not instruments. So they're already behind on some of the kids. So maybe if we could sort of address some of those issues in that order, then maybe we'll get down and we can try to figure out what we need to do.
Do you have any other question?
I think, yeah,
We'll come back around for
yeah,
comments, but
that class of 10, really? No, I worry about that. I mean, we're having only 4 classes and they're all at 10. That's only 40 kids.
you could. put-
Yeah, that's awful expensive. I mean, feasibly, it's what, 20? If we could put it out there, we'd probably want to fill a class at least with 20 kids.
He's saying the minimum. Minimum, yeah.
I thought you
Yeah,
said
20, 24 or something.
The minimum is 10. 10 students to carry a class, 4 classes offered, or 4
It
teachers.
should be 20.
We're projecting 4, but.
Okay.
It's fluid.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 20 kids, if you had an interest of 20 kids or something, you carry 15, 20. My concern is you get it too small. They'll want more than 4. So, okay, if you get 10 people, they'll want 10 people, 10 courses with 10 people. How do you cut off those? So, I mean, it has to be a big enough. They do it at the universities everywhere else. You do it in art classes right now. What do you cut for? If you can't hold a course, what's your cut line in a course?
Well, that depends. It depends on how many sections are offered, what the course is. We try to get at least 20 kids in a class. We're looking for 20, 25 up to.
You wouldn't hold a class for 15 or 10 on like even drama. If you only had 15 kids sign up for drama, it wouldn't carry for the FTE.
That's what they have.
If there was only one drama class though.
But they have to.
That does occur. I mean, in high schools too, you get AP or singletons that, certain kids have to have in their pathway.
For graduation or whatever.
Yeah.
When Cindy presented, I thought we do have classes where there's even 4 and 5 students for those language.
Oh,
The,
the dual language culture and literacy class was like 7.
It was really low this year.
Yeah.
And we made some changes next year to make sure that doesn't happen again.
But usually if you're carrying a low number, it's often because you're trying to build a program, like it's the first year you offered it. And it's an important program that you're trying to create in your school or to get a new pathway or something for kids.
Sure.
So that first year you may carry it at a lower number, but then it has to build over time or you can't maintain it. So.
Any questions? Okay, I think Mom had questions and then Clary.
Got a bunch of questions. Let's go to the 0 hour for a minute, okay? And you said there'd be no transportation provided for that. Tell me if I'm way off base. Feels like to me that if I have advanced music classes, if I have advanced dance classes, if I have core subjects, it feels like to me we would be excluding kids that don't have transportation to get those if we put those in the 0 hour. And that just doesn't feel good to me. Am I way off base on
It
that?
doesn't feel good to me either, Mark. It's a reality.
There was also on one of your slides up there that you would have to hire 4 more elective teachers. And you would probably have to move 4 teachers of core subjects out of the school. From an accounting point of view, that nets to 0. Okay, And so I'm kind of questioning where this $90,000 times four, or you have 340,000 up there. Because we're losing four and gaining four.
That's, if we can't place those four core teachers.
If they're
somewhere
held
else,
harmless.
If they're held harmless, yeah.
But,
We may not have a spot for them. We may, yeah.
but I would hope in a district the size of ours, with the alleged teacher shortage that we have, that you would be able to find someplace that $340,000 to $360,000.
Yeah.
Feels like to me, most of that should evaporate.
We'd hope we can place those.
Okay. On the 0 hour, are we looking at that as a Band-Aid to get us to the point where we can really do something? Or are you thinking this is an ongoing deal?
This is a one-time ESSER where we have funds that.
So it'd be 1 year.
1 year.
Okay. Let me just go on the record as far as making the change from a 6 to a 7 period day for the 22-23 school year. I will tell you, I think that's one of the stupidest ideas I think I've ever heard. Because, I look at Dr. Watson, what he would have to do, I look what would happen to the district. And, you talk about the time frame involved to pull that off. I would put that in the ain't no way in hell category that it would ever happen.
Well, we agreed for once.
Hmm?
We agreed for once.
Amber, you and I agree a lot.
We do. I
We
do.
really
Just
do
joking.
agree a lot. And yeah, Holly, I was thinking the same thing you were. With a 7:55, 7:50
750.
7:50 start time. If you've got as big a problem as I keep hearing we do about kids wanting or not wanting to start at 7:30, if you schedule an hour before 7:50 and make that 6:50.
Yeah.
Very limited population, and if you've got teenage kids, they've got full lives. And if you try to move that into football practice or, if you try to music lessons or whatever, I just really question what kind of demand you would have. Yeah, I think that's probably about all I have for now.
Thank you. Clarine, questions?
Getting back to my questions. So the 0 period, before school or after school?
I would anticipate more after school. Chip, is that, I don't know.
I'm with you, Mon. I don't think people are gonna come at 6:50 AM when the concern is school starts too early already. But when you start getting into 3:45, 3:50 for dismissal, I think that you're gonna run into after-school concerns as well. So the teachers that I've talked to, most of them are not very interested in coming. It's just that's really early.
And the families.
Yeah, well, If school if school lets out at 2:40 now and you add a 50 or 60-minute period, right? Then you're still sitting at 3. Help me out with the math, Mon.
3:20,
3:30,
45.
3,
4.
You need 5-minute passing time.
Oh, yeah, the 5-minute passing.
3:45, they would get out.
3:45.
Okay.
Yeah. So later than
So,
elementary.
It's already been a really bad, like the whole 2 days have been like a whole week. All right, so they get out at 3:45. Then my other question is the classes, you're talking robotics, but is there accredited course in robotics as an elective? Because
Catalog.
Indian Hills has it.
It's in our course catalog.
It just hasn't been offered before it.
Okay, so the 4 classes that you're talking about would all be offered at 2:45 and they would get out at 3:45. And there'd only be 4 of them. And so then depending on how many kids signed up for those 4 classes, we're going to spend, I don't know, $53,600 so that we might could have them. And to tell you the truth, mine, I think it's worse than a Band-Aid, but I really,
For 40 kids.
I know, right. I feel like something needs to be done, but I'm not sure that this is the something that needs to be done for this year. I know this started clear back in January, this whole conversation, and I know that I believe, but I'm not positive that Chip, I'm gonna talk about you, but I'm gonna turn my back to you so you don't know I'm talking about you.
Okay.
I think, I just really feel like he's been hammered about this whole thing for months now. And I really feel like that he's been caught between rocks and rocks and he's been squished to the meat grinder. And I feel that part of that, I take responsibility as a board. Because we haven't really secured this down and been able to work on it like we should because we got waylaid with other things that were important, but I don't even know that they were as important as this issue. This has been a really important issue, and I think that we should have done something more than we have to this point, and that I feel like I don't, okay, I'm gonna talk for myself, but as a board member, I feel like that our job, so my job is to really help out my schools, right? And that they're the ones who should, like, if there's issues, actually go to the superintendent comes to me, there's this way of doing things, and that we as a board have discussions and we let Nancy know what we need or want, and then Nancy gives the superintendent direction, and then the superintendent gives you direction, and I just feel like the whole thing got muddied somehow, this is my own opinion, since January between different people coming to you and talking to you and talking to the SCC and talking to the superintendent. And I feel like it might have been a better discussion not being out there so far and maybe being brought in closer to us. And here we have it, so we can go through it. But I just feel like it's not even a Band-Aid, and I don't even know, you know, like there's so many unknowns. How many kids, how many not kids, how many electives, what electives? And then to the point of your board, those kids have already got their classes all figured out. Their parents know what they're taking, and then their parents have already figured out their schedules on how they're going to manage things. So maybe there's a few kids that get an elective, but that wasn't the whole point of this. That was not the purpose. The purpose was to get more electives. But then that brings me back to the policy, which is what I asked Nancy about a long time ago. The policy says the school council and the principal brings this to us, and then you decide, you know, that you decide whether you want a 6 period or 7 period. But now here we are discussing this 6 and 7 period, and I feel like as a board, we just need to make a decision and get done with this. It's like bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And I'm tired of it. And I'm sure based on Amber's little outburst last board meeting, which was great because that's how I felt, but she expressed her feeling.
Again, we agree.
Yes. I just feel like we need, as a board, to come to a resolution and move on. These guys don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. I'm just saying, so like, somebody make a motion or resolution and move on.
Any more clearing? Sorry, any more questions?
No, I don't have.
Amber, did you have a question?
Well, half you guys didn't ask questions, you made comments, so we're making comments that I'm gonna make some comments.
It's a comment.
I know, well, okay, I would love to make a comment. Me too. Well, okay, yeah.
Well, I haven't gone yet,
So
so.
let's just make sure there's any questions still. Just to kind of keep it somewhat orderly. Do you have any questions? No?
Me too.
No, that's fine, Amanda, you can.
Okay, all right, so I guess I just have one kind of question / response regarding this 0 hour and the courses that would be offered. someone, Mont, I think it was, said it wasn't fair if it was like a specialty course after school and no transportation being available. And so, but it seems to me like it would make sense after school to offer classes that are also offered during the school day. So a student has a choice between taking advantage of the extra hour or having it within the school day. But that's just kind of a question I had, and then another question I had, and I don't know that you would know the answer, but because it's only just been a week since we did move back the start time 20 minutes. Has there been any interest in the school community, the parents and students that have previously opted out of this period, who maybe now come back? Or if they are interested, what would be the avenue for that?
Okay, so your first question about 0-hour courses and what would the offerings be? None of the classes that we potentially discussed offering in a 0-hour option would be one-off specialty classes. They'd just be the beginning level.
Another section of something.
Another section of an entry level anyone could take. So in terms of that question, hopefully that answers that. And with your question about the start time, I don't know what percentage of the Draper Park community is formally aware that the board voted to change the start time last week, because we haven't had any district communication out. I've asked Cindy about that, and I think that's something that's important to do. As it sits right now, the last number that I had for late start for next year was, I think, just below 200. Right now we have 400.
About half.
So that's a lower number, but I don't know what will happen between now and the day school starts.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right,
Can I ask one more?
one more questions, yes.
You brought it up. Okay. But Dr. Chip, that's my compromise to Dr. Chip.
Sounds good.
You mentioned that it would be an additional elective that would be in 0 hours. You would not remove any class currently taught during the day and move it only to where it was offered. Okay. Thank you.
So I do have a question now, based on Nancy's question.
Nancy, what are you doing?
If you have those 200 kids come back, is there space in your schedule to accommodate them, or what's going to happen?
We will make space in our schedule.
You'll figure it out.
Okay.
Okay. Good answer.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes questions, or did you have one follow-up?
I have one other question. So when we did the survey about the electives that people are most interested in at Draper Park, 45.9% said visual arts and 41% said physical education and healthy lifestyles. Were those areas things that are being considered for the extra classes?
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, now let's move to kind of some comments, and let's start with Amanda. And how about if we just kind of circle around this way? Is that all right?
So,
Oh, go second, just since it's my school. So is that okay?
Okay. That's fine, yeah. And so Amanda, then Holly, and then Clarine, and we'll work around.
okay, so I know there's been a lot of discussion, lots of feelings about this one. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the community, from teachers, a lot of waken the last 3 days at 4:30 in the morning, thinking about so much of this. And so a lot of thought and effort and consideration has gone into it. And I recognize that there are a lot of perspectives and individual opinions depending on where you stand in this. But there are a few key factors that I feel like this comes down to when we're looking at the 50,000 foot view. And the first is, what by law are we supposed to be providing? One of the things that I noticed, and by the way, Clarine brought up a good point about the timeline. I went back and I combed through all of our notes and meetings as a board and looked back at the timeline of what's happened, starting back in September, when the Arts Consortium met, and we talked about doing an arts and elective survey. And then December, we finally did the survey. And in January, we met and talked about, let's get the survey out to the board. Not long after, 2 weeks later, Zach Giddings, who was the band and orchestra teacher at Draper Park, he submitted his letter of resignation. And our first conversation happened on March 15th, where we talked about the Arts Consortium report and the initial DPMS scheduled discussion. And that's where we were introduced to what the arts wheel looks like at Albion, all of that. And then on March 29th, we talked about the scheduled discussion update, and we're told that nothing could be done. And then our last meeting, what came back felt really messy and it felt expensive. And then that's where the conversation of maybe we just go with 7 periods, maybe that's a better option. That's where it came from. I don't want people to feel like we haven't been talking about this. We've been talking about a lot of things. So when we get back to what are we required by law to do as a district, one of the things that came up in one of those presentations is the fact we have a lot of students who are opting out of the CCA, the digital literacy, and the health class. And those are actually required. And a large reason why the kids are opting out is because of schedule constriction. The other is that music is technically part of the Common Core. There was legislation in 2015 that passed Every Child Achieves Act. And it was meant to ensure that all students, regardless of socioeconomic status, experience the demonstrable impact music education has. And that music and art were specifically named as core subjects, and the act was meant to specifically address the national problem of the narrowing of the curriculum that has taken place under the No Child Left Behind Act. So I think we really have to look at that. I recognize that RISE testing only tests 3 subjects, but technically there are other subjects that are part of the core. And if we're not providing something that's working with music education, and that means, into a feeder as well, because this is impacting curriculum, as Steve said, then we're not fulfilling those legal requirements and expectations. And just like a language or a sport, it requires building on a skill from year to year, particularly with instrumental music, as has been referenced. The second main point of what I thought a lot about is what have we as a district settled upon as major priorities, and what does our strategic plan say? When you look at it, we make specific reference to the ideals set out in the Utah Portrait of a Graduate, and we actually listed all of those things out very deliberately. It's intentional, laying out the expectations that the holistic needs of a student will be met, that they will develop skills and communications, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation, collaboration, and teamwork. And even though those skills are taught in every class, the arts and electives are where they get to practice those skills in a hands-on way, which is also something that the strategic plan talks about. In my committee work in the post-secondary pathways, one of the things that did come up quite frequently was the fact that we have these amazing post-secondary pathways once the kids hit the high school level, but they're not, once they get to 9th grade, it's like this onslaught of options, drinking from a fire hose. They need some time before to be able to properly take advantage of by the time they get to high school, or meaningfully. Number 3 is, what do the students say? We can reference that through the arts and elective survey that was done in December, and 73 to 83% of the students said the electives and the arts were either important or very important to them. And yet 31% of the students didn't take electives because there wasn't room in their schedule. So that's a problem that we as a board have to address. And that's a top-down thing. In my mind, there is precedence for this. In the past, we've addressed it by implementing a 7-period schedule, which is, we have 3 middle schools on a 7-period schedule. Have Indian Hills, we have Midvale, and we have Eastmont. Yeah, and Clarion pointed out to me earlier that some of those middle schools have actually made those 7-period schedules in part to be able to accommodate things like AVID and other things like, right, we can speak to those later, but I think honestly, when it comes down to it, I agree with what Clarion was saying. Our community has dealt with a number of issues recently in the last few years that have really divided our community. And it would be extraordinarily beneficial if they had a chance to move forward and move forward together in creating a quality education for these kids and to follow what we're expected to do legally from a state standpoint, from a federal standpoint, also based off of what we determined as a board is important according to our strategic plan. So when it comes down to it, I also recognize, similar to what was said, I think it's unfair to expect that the school would make this change immediately. I think we need to give them a year to be able to make that adjustment. And so I don't think a 7 period should be implemented until 2023, 24 school year. But I also don't want us to make the same mistake we made this year of getting behind the gun. And so I have a motion prepared where I would like to ask the administration to immediately prepare for a 7 period that would start in the 2023 school year. And that it would be given a chance for full implementation before it was considered to be changed again. That we could give them 3 full years for them to actually be able to implement it and then to properly evaluate whether or not it's working. So that's where I'm at.
Holly? Thank you, President, for letting me go second. Clarine, to address your comment, Draper Park is my school, as you know, that when you are a board member, the school that your constituents go to, you also represent that school. So just like we might have our graduation assignments for speaking, I'm speaking at Alta High's graduation, although Alta doesn't reside in my district. I have constituents that go there. So that's why I asked to speak, because I have as much, if not more, in District 7 that attend Draper Park. So that's why I feel it's also my school to represent. A lot of what I'm going to say is actually very similar to Amanda. I do not feel it's fair for this school to make a change for the fall. I know even that when you build a board, Dr. Watts, he also relies on his counseling center. Dr. Bittner is hiring, you've just hired 3 new counselors and they'll be training. And I understand the amount of stress that would cause as well. Not only the burden to the teachers that are not sure, at that point, they would have to reevaluate what classes they're teaching. These teachers that may be looking at, am I going to be teaching or not? So I'm not in favor of moving any change for this fall as well. I believe this discussion really started around 6 years ago when I came as a patron to the meeting, and everyone remembers that board meeting that lasted until 2 a.m. I definitely believe this is an equity issue. When we have 3 middle schools that provide a 7 period schedule and a little more of self-directed learning is possible because children have a little more choice in their schedule and the classes they're enrolling in. That is a little more personalized learning and education because these kids get to choose more electives. And when we read our access to high quality learning, we see right here, it says, CSD will provide all students access to engaging, challenging, and diverse pathways for successful learning. We talk about embedding STEAM, mathematics, principles, interactive learning, arts integration, cross-curricular, hands-on. I do not want any core teacher in this room or listening to this meeting not to know that I don't highly value our core teachers. I know our core teachers provide engaging learning experiences. I know our core teachers can ignite a fire with our kids. And I know that a lot of amazing things happen there. But I think that's part of the issue. I think that when this policy was written, back when Dr. Briscoe was superintendent, and we actually put that policy into action and we tried looking at a schedule change at the school level, it kind of became a battleground, and it kind of became core teacher against elective teacher and parents against teachers. And that was so heartbreaking because, I know our parents value our teachers. We are so grateful. We have amazing teachers at Draper Park. We have amazing core teachers and we have amazing elective teachers. We also have amazing families, and the level of involvement of our parents is pretty incredible. The amount of hours that they're engaged and volunteering. And so I also believe, as Clarine said, that this is something we need to address as a school board so that the local school building doesn't become a battleground. The process matters, and we don't want to fragment the community, and it already has been. And as we look at our district and we say, well, we've got 3 schools where kids can go to these other schools. I know a parent that moved their child over to Indian Hills in part so that they could have their other elective. And if we're treating all of our kids fairly, they should be able to have the same opportunities and access at all the schools. So I am definitely feel that we are looking at implementing our strategic plan and our access to high quality learning by providing the experience of having options for our children to have self-guided learning, to address whole child, to have more hands-on and collaborative and opportunities that can be easily accessed through the electives. So I also am in favor of making a motion for a change for the 2023-2024 school year.
Okay, thank you. So board, just a reminder of the time, let's do Clarine, then Mont, then Amber and Steve, and then I'll.
Well, I actually had like 4 pages I was gonna read, but I'll wait for the good time. Read them all, there'll be an opportunity. Looking at Mount Jordan, I believe it has a 7th period to accommodate avid and dual immersion. I think Indian Hills has a 7th period to accommodate their large numbers and allow for teaming and dual immersion. I think Midville has a 7th period to accommodate ELD remediation and dual immersion. And I don't really believe that we can have total equal access and equal opportunities because of all the different cultures. Like you go to Midville and it's like walking into a whole new world. Literally with all the languages and all the different cultures that are there. I do believe something needs to happen at Draper Park. And I think that if we can't accommodate for what we need to for all the students, then we need to let Mont start a new boundaries thing, because he's the only one I know who's done a new boundaries, and we didn't have to have meetings like 3
You did
times.
it right.
Came and yelled at us.
Oh, I'll take
Right,
that.
that's what I wrote.
Credit goes to
No
me.
one stormed their building. It's great. No one stormed the building, so I'm all in favor of letting Mont figure out how to mellow that out and open up Crescent Middle School again. If we're too big for a building, then let's start looking for another building and figuring out what to do. I'm all in favor for Amanda making her motion. It is in her, the school is in her area. The school is her school that's been assigned to her because it is her area. And I do feel that the policy that we are working off about, which kind of bothers me a little bit, because I feel like, Chip, we're jumping over the top of your head and telling you now what we want you to do. And that wasn't what the policy was for. It was supposed to be for the SEC and the principal to get together to make the needs for the most of the kids. And I understand that. And I feel like we're now coming heavy top down, but I also feel like something needs to be done. And so I feel like our policy needs to be reviewed for that, and also for the PTA and PTCs, because I don't think that that should be given to the SECs. And I'll tell you why, because then it puts parents against parents, and that puts the kids in the middle. And that means we're kicking the can down the street. And I don't think that those parents and those kids should be put in the middle and stuck with the can. And now it's come back to us. We now have the can of worms. And so I think we need to review those 2 policies and say, we are where the buck ends and stops. Bring us the situations, and then we need to make some of those decisions when it comes to PTA, PTCs and new schedules. So I have to say.
Thanks, Mom.
I'm going to start out with Draper Park Middle School is arguably one of the best 3 middle schools in the state of Utah.
The top.
But it is a very, very good middle school. If your inbox looked anything like my inbox for the last week, we seem to have a little bit of a fracture in there.
Yes.
We have parents fractured as to what they would want to have, and there's not really a clear message coming from the parents. We have the faculty fractured as to whether they are a core teacher or whether they're an elective teacher. And let me just go on record of saying, I don't care if Draper Park Middle School has 6 periods or if it has 7 periods, it is still going to be one of the top middle schools in the state of Utah. End of report, okay? The kids that come to Draper Park are coming from families that give them enriched environments at home. They come to school in kindergarten, well prepared to enter the education system. Kids that are that prepared, does not matter if they have 6 or 7 periods in a day. I will also say that a 50-minute class period is pretty well respected everywhere as an hour of instruction. And even when you get out of the public school system and you get into the professional life, Amanda, I don't know what your continuing, what is it, CLE?
Continuing legal education, yeah.
Continuing legal, I know my continuing professional education as a CPA, if I sit in the classroom for 50 minutes, I get an hour's worth of credit for being there. So I don't know that I'm feeling like our kids are going to be irreparably harmed if we go to a 50-minute day. I would also say that this is not just a Draper Park Middle School issue. This will spread like COVID-19 throughout the whole district. It will go from middle school to middle school to middle school, and you're going to see it then jump the gap and go to the high school. I thought the letter that that we all received from Mikkel Mortensen from Brighton High School, extremely well written. Very, very good point that she made in there. And I think you're going to see, she even challenged the holy grail of the trimester. I mean, that is like blasphemy. And to me, the big question that, would kind of spurred this on is the whole DLI controversy, because the kids in DLI are using an elective. It is an elective to be in DLI, which means they can't take some of the other electives. And what I keep hearing is we're really trying to put the STEAM back into STEM and make it really a STEAM program instead of a STEM program. And I just look at it and think, if my experience as a band student going through the school system, if there's any class that could use a longer class period, it would be the art, and the performing arts especially would be very advantageous to them. But I see them saying, just give us the ability to do it. I really feel like, well, before I go there, I will tell you that I think I expressed an opinion when I should have been asking questions about what I thought about going to 7 period next year. I don't know if anybody questioned how I felt about that one or not. I could live with, I don't like it, but I could live with if my arm were to be twisted with 0 hour for a year. But I really think that if you want to try that, just because of the absolute ridiculous expense of trying to do classes with 10 kids, you need to raise the bar. I know you put it at 10 trying to see if you could fill it and make it work. But I think they need to like double the height of the bar on that and go from 10 to 20 to make it function, to see if it would even be worthwhile. So yeah, I would be fully in favor of for the 23-24 year. And in many ways, I feel like our bosses are the patrons of the district. Our bosses are the people that vote. And I think the Draper Park community, by and large, whether it be the vocal minority or whatever, but what I'm hearing is they would like to go that way. And in my heart of heart, I feel like 7 period day would be the period in sense. That's where I come down on that.
All right. Okay, so I do not care if it's a 6 or 7 period day. I just think for next year, it's unrealistic, it's impossible, it's even ridiculous that we were talking about it. I want to remind everyone and caution our board that the reason I'm sitting here is because of top-down decisions by the board without involving parents. That is why I won my election. So I just caution us not to go through a process. Like, we have a process of having 3 readings, and I will vote no to your motion because of we're not following our process. And the last time what Nancy read, like last time we discussed this, we said we'd form a task force to study it. And I think that's what we should do. I mean, I may be in the minority, that's fine. But the point is, like, I want to do what the community wants, and I'm not sure we know what the community wants right now. Like, we are hearing, Mont said, we're hearing mixed opinions from parents and teachers. So I would like to go through a process, let the parents have time to come and email us, because right now, yes, we're getting emails, but that's a small group of people that actually know we're even discussing it, you guys. That's not the whole community. They don't know what's going on. So that's my, I think those are all my comments. Okay, that was fast. Steve, go Steve.
If you would have listened to me several years ago, we would not be here. I voted against the 6th period when we got to the 7th period and we got the 6th period. And with the struggle, we forced it upon all the people for 6th period and people make do with it. And then Eastmont, a couple other schools came back and said, you force this upon us, we need to change. We gave them the option to change, and then some went back and forth. Interesting process. The question was at the time is we felt we wanted to get the academics up. So we were taking back some of the arts and stuff to get our academics up. We just had a study presented to us, showed that from school to school, based upon their own school, there was not that significant difference in academics. The schools that did well, did well. The schools that didn't do well, didn't do well. It didn't matter if it was 6th or 7th period. However, what happened in that process is we lost the arts, the language, PE. We lost a lot of stuff. There's sort of the same thing with our elementary. We wanted to push academics in the elementary, and we just really pushed the heck out of them. The kids are screaming at us. So finally we put in brain boosters, and the kids said, oh, that's the best part of my day. English language and all the other stuff is the most important part, maybe. I don't know, but they had a lot of fun doing the other stuff. And for many of our kids, especially some of our kids on our other schools, Midville and Union and Eastmont and stuff, some of those kids coming to school may mean going to PE class or going to a music class or going to some other classes, something that makes it more exciting for them to come. So 7th period, I'm fine for 7th period. My question would be is if we're going to do a study. I hate to say just one school is going without looking at all of them. Our other schools have 6, but they really don't. Every single school has some of their dang thing differently. We've got one thing at Albion, and that's totally different than the other thing that's going on at Butler. Butler's got sort of a half of more electives, but they're only half an elective. Yeah. So you have them, and then anyway, so it's really sort of crazy. So it isn't equal, as Mont always says. It really isn't equal. The reason, so I would go for a 7th period. Not this year. I would question pushing it for next year before we sort of have a discussion of the whole district. I'm wondering if the whole district needs to go, because we're going to continue having this battle going back and forth as to, and it's so difficult for our administration to run 3 or 4 different models. Yes. It truly is. It's hard for them to run different models. And especially they're almost all different models. Be nice to find out what it is there. As far as the additional 0 period classes, there were several reasons for the 0 period class. First off, we said for those parents, we can't give you 8:30. We're going to do a study, but for another year, if that's the case, and perhaps we could run a 0 period so your kid can still get elective. Okay, because you're making that decision, just taking away the kid who's elective. The other one is the DLI program. We've been saying, oh, the DLI program is important, and it is. It's a good program, but it takes away one of the electives from our middle schoolers. The parents love that. I've heard from a lot of parents that have middle schoolers, and middle schoolers are saying, I want out of the program because I want my electives. And so we're having a hard time keeping them and going into high school because the middle schools are they're saying, I'd much rather have an elective sometimes in the DLI. So by having it a 0 period, it may give our DLI a program another push for a year 2, so that our DLI allow them to stay in the program because they going after. So the parents that drive the kids there late, most likely they can drive and pick them up late. gives them that option, and the DLI parents. So I'm leaning towards, like you're saying, I really hate to push this about the 7th period without taking a look at this district-wide. I don't think it's answered from all the area. We haven't heard from anybody.
So my question is, with that comment, are you talking about the whole district then going to 7 period, then forcing all the,
I'm talking about bringing us back to 7th period, which would allow everybody to have elective.
for all middle schools?
All middle
So
school.
then you're gonna have the high schools all become quarters and not trimesters.
If possible.
It's a whole can of worms.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the middle schools make much difference in 6th and 7th
I
period.
think you have to be careful with some of our middle schools that have
Yeah,
remediation taking place during part of those hours, that you don't foul that up too much. Because for some of those, that
I don't think we do that.
It'd be nice to look at that. I mean, just to see, maybe come to that conclusion that the 7th period option is fine. But I know this was, everybody was pushing against the 7th period at the beginning. We didn't want to do it. That was the reason. So that's where I would go. Other than the comment I made before, if in fact we push this off for another year, we've got to do something about getting those 6th and 8th graders an opportunity for music and stuff. We are going to be losing several music teachers this next coming year if we don't do something. This is a rumor I'm hearing. So if we don't, we got to do something this next semester. Otherwise, we're going to be having some problems. So we need to do something with our music program. Either 0 or have more during the day and have a core on the end of the day so they can take that core. That's what I encourage to happen.
Okay, all right. In a couple of minutes, and I too, like all of you, have lots and lots of thoughts. But to sum it all up, I cannot in good conscience support a decision being made tonight, even if it is for implementation in fall 23. I do support what we talked about in March as forming a task force or a group, a working group that could work on not only the Draper Park, but like has been mentioned, district-wide, kind of take a look at the schedules. I feel like we could set a time frame. I mean, and let's be intentional about this and not just kind of keep quote unquote kicking it down the road. I mean, last winter and this spring, you all know as well as I do what occupied the board and the administration's time. Thing after thing after thing kept coming, right? So it was not purposeful that we were not having these intentional discussions. It was anyway, I won't go there, take time to go there, but I feel like if we organize a task force, we can talk about some of the specifics at our roundtable when we're discussing the strategic plan so that we can give some clear direction to that group of what they would discuss, what they would cover, what some of the priorities are, and how a school schedule would relate to that, but then keep it also specific to Draper Park. To Clarine's point about the policy, the policy regarding secondary schedules was made if a change wants to be initiated by the school. There's nothing in that policy that prevents the board from initiating and discussing and proposing and deciding a change. But that being said, I still feel like there is an element of process that is in that policy that I feel the board to make a decision should follow. So that is kind of where I am. As far as 0 period, I feel like that is something that I'm fine with if the school administration feels like, hey, there's 1 or 2 things, gems that would really work and that would really solve a problem or help. I feel like that's something that they could do anyway. I don't know that they would need board approval to do it unless it's something that the board is adopting as a program. But maybe I'm wrong.
Do they have to because of money? Because it's over $50,000.
Well, I mean, if it's just 1 or 2 sections here or there, and I know, I mean, the school, they have land trust money, they have TSSP money, all of those things could be used for it. So I guess is what I'm saying is on that one, they feel like it really will help out in a temporary situation, they could go ahead, but anyway. And so, just, yeah. Oh, I had two other comments too, that in regards to a couple of things, considering we talk about this, if we decide to go ahead with the task force, but the idea of kind of building feeder programs, right, for high schools and stuff. I think that would be one of the questions that we would need to talk about, and that just kind of making this one decision isn't going to just solve all the problems. I think it is a more comprehensive approach that needs to be studied and taken. Now I'm done.
I am totally okay with the motion not being made tonight. I think, Amber, you've got a lot of wisdom in what you said. And task force, you know, that's one of those big words that I don't know that I understand what a task force looks like. But my request is that we don't put ourselves and building administration and the community in a box again, and that we move quickly on this, and that we get a motion made, we get a decision made with plenty of time. I think anybody that's listened to the meeting tonight know pretty much, it feels like to me, we're pretty much at a unanimous basis on what we think that a motion would pass eventually. And that's a direction we are heading. So, you know, I hope that calms some ideas out in the community. But I just want to make sure that we put, just like tonight, we have a hard close, so I should shut up. At 5, we have a hard close for this task force, that we be able to make a decision with plenty of time to have it happen.
I have a concern about the whole task force because none of the other middle schools are coming to us and saying we have issues. None of them are coming to us and saying we have problems. They're pretty well called their own problems. And I really feel like the only reason this one's here is because it just keeps getting hashed and hashed and hashed. And people did come and people did go, and we just sort of kind of, I don't know, I don't want to use the word set on it. So we can.
So we would talk about, I mean, what we talked about in March was forming a task group to study and work on the Draper Park specific issues. So I feel like let's all take what we talked about tonight into consideration, and that at our roundtable, we can further define what that means and what the scope of discussion would be. Amanda?
My concern is we are turning it right back into Chip's lap, which last time was so ugly for our community. It was, I mean, I don't want Chip to have to be in charge of the task force.
It would be the board.
It would be the
The
board.
board is
Okay.
initiating it. No, yeah.
The school will have nothing.
Board and the district. would-
So I have a few comments. Number one, until we make the decision, I don't think anyone in that community can totally heal and progress.
Right.
As far as, because it's very divided. There are people who are very upset about not having those options. It's a DLI community and having the constraints of the 6th period. So, and if we're going to have a task force, then my thing would be, we'd have to have a hard stop by November, because I'd want it in place before registration cards.
Yeah, that would all, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, that we'd have to be very intentional and have a time frame to make sure that it's realistic and.
I would still like to
Make
make
your
a
motion.
motion.
Make your motion.
So I would like to make a motion that the administration will immediately begin to prepare for a 7-period day at Draper Park Middle School, starting with the 23-24 school year.
That motion is in order. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion to the motion?
Now, the motion is they begin to prepare, but not that happens.
Well, that it would
No,
be.
it
the-
would start.
Yes, we're basically deciding that it would be implemented in the
In
You're
23.
saying that we vote right now that 23-24 be a 7-period.
Mhm. And they have a whole year to plan.
I guess I have some discussion to the motion. I'll be brief. My concern is that we follow the process so that all involved in the school feels that it has been given enough proper, thoughtful discussion and evidence base, and that we're carrying out part of our strategic plan And right now, to say 7 period, we had a large study done with Cindy where we looked at all sorts of things. So I would be interested in saying, we're going to do a task force. There will be a schedule change for the 2023-2024 school year. But I'm not sure about committing to the 7 period. Because after our task force, we say, there's benefits to an 8 period AB day or something else after the task. Okay, yes, further discussion.
If you go back and we look at the board presentations on March 15th, March 29th,
Mhm.
before there's a lot of information on there. I don't know what else we're gonna come up with a task force. Are we creating a meeting just for the sake of a meeting? Like, I don't know, like, I feel like I've looked at it,
That's true.
looking at our legal obligations, looking at
True.
and all of the things in the strategic plan, looking what the students want. What other information do we need?
Well, I would 100% support your motion
Uh-huh.
if we were to vote on it at our next
Okay.
regularly scheduled.
To have an additional reading.
I supported 100%, but tonight I just can't. I'm with you, but I can't vote with you.
No, I get it.
You get it?
And I respect that.
And I just feel like we need to put it in this meeting was called on the spur of the moment, you know, and I just feel like I have to have,
Give the community more time.
if we were to do what you're suggesting, it would be very good for my inbox. Because I'm afraid we're gonna get a whole bunch when we wait, but I just feel like we need to.
So you're saying that at the next meeting?
The next regularly scheduled meeting.
Put this on the
Further-
agenda.
Further. Okay,
I would be in
further
favor of that.
discussion to the motion.
I would be in favor of that too. Sorry.
We should have a motion on the table.
So, yeah,
In a second.
well, I just want to say, I'm not sure. I still feel like I would want to have a little more comprehensive input from the Draper Park community before making this firm of a decision. And I don't know that we could get that by our next meeting. But I feel like if we don't want to do the task force thing, we just want to dwell on this question. I think we could say, you know, we're heading into summer, so, right? It's gonna be hard to get input from people in whatever form, whether it's survey or whatever. So, I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm
First
against
reading,
making it, but I am fine with setting up a timeframe, like a time when we will have a decision made. And I feel like, you know, sometime in August, like at the start of the school year.
Can I have a deadline for the task?
Well, or for the decision to be made, and then we can talk about it at our next meeting for how to go about making that decision, or like sketching out the process. Okay.
I'm not feeling good about going that far out where this
Me neither.
is noticed up saying possible action.
Neither.
I'm okay not doing action tonight, but I don't know that I'm okay pushing it off that far.
I just think we're not helping the school and they're helping Chip in any way. I'm just, you know, I'm
I agree.
being the mother hen Chip over here. I'm really sorry, but I just.
Like grows, we keep picking the scab off and
Yes.
wanting it to heal.
Yes, so,
Yes. So if it's the difference, we have to be clear. So if it's the difference of being able to vote on it next meeting or tabling it out for a lot of discussion and task force, that may change the way Mom votes.
so,
Definitely not.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's,
I
I will
can-
ask for a vote on the motion, or
I can withdraw the motion.
to
You don't
withdraw the
amend it?
motion.
I'll withdraw.
All right, motion has been withdrawn.
Put it on the next agenda.
It can be on next week.
And so then the board is
The second
requesting that
reading.
this item will be put on the
It's
next
not really the
agenda.
second reading. We have gone over this and over this. and
Yeah,
over
but
this.
that's our process.
So-
Question,
Yes.
next meeting is at roundtable?
That's roundtable,
We
so,
want to vote at roundtable or have it?
well,
We have to
we are
come-
having a business meeting because it's also the budget.
Yes.
So we can add this.
I mean, so we can add it to the agenda. It will be kind of a long day.
Can I ask a
And-
question? What changes it from one week to the next week? I mean, like if she, I wish we wouldn't have withdrawn yet.
I can make
What is going to change everybody's mind from this week to 2 weeks that we can do or don't do? Because we've already done it, as Amanda said, for the whole year.
I'll tell you what I want that would make me feel more comfortable in making a decision is to have better input from the community that's been gathered from the community. I know we've heard from a lot of people, but
You already
often,
have all those surveys. Okay.
well.
Surveys
but the
about our
surveys weren't about the
selectives.
schedule. They were about elective.
I feel like I've turned my cards face up on the table.
Well, I think we've all.
I'm not interested in doing a huge survey.
But cards
Doing
face
that
up on the
either, not
table.
interested.
I want people to be able to come back now, after we put our cards on the table, say, I like it.
To email us.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm concerned about multiple surveys just because this is such a divisive issue and I think it does just put it right back to our administrator over there and too much divide in the community. So, but I will support going to next meeting for sure.
The teachers on it.
Yes, exactly.
So can I make a motion on the zero period or we just?
Go ahead. The motion would be in order.
I'd like to make a motion then that we move forward with the zero period as proposed for 1 year period of time. Give the administration
Add 20 students.
at least 20 students to carry. And then we also put an emphasis on the music programs for next year, trying to figure out if we move forward the zero period, how we might be able to increase our music programs so we don't kill off our high school programs.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have discussion. A question. Would that only entail if they for sure have gauged interest and know that those kids, we won't spend the money unless we know the
They'll
kids.
survey and people like to sign up.
They would just move forward, like they said, they would find out what teachers are available, send that out to the parents and say, are you interested? Fill the
Okay,
class to 20. If they fill the class to 20, then we.
so we could be talking one class or two, not necessarily the four.
It depends
Just
on how many
whatever.
parents.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had enough to fill 4 or 5, we may fill 4 or 5.
Okay.
That's the interest.
Okay.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion to the motion? All right, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Right.
Any opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. 1, 2,
Most of us.
3, 4, 5. 5 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 absent. Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, board. Thank you, administration. Yes, Mr. Watts?
Can I ask one question? And I'm sorry, I know it's 5:12. In terms of the discussion around changing the schedule next year, I didn't really hear a decision made about that. And there's a lot of concern on my part and on my teacher's part about if that's gonna happen or what. So I'm just.
Not for this fall.
No change.
No, not for this fall. No.
We would have had to make, we would have had to make a motion to change it.
Not gonna come up at the next meeting.
No.
No,
No,
it's done.
no one's in favor of it at all.
Thank you.
We can now breathe now.
Okay, now, if you
I'll go from that.
If you pulled down your mask, are you smiling now? No change for next.
So next,
Yay!
so Chip, next meeting would be discussed for implementation in 23-24. Is that clear, everybody?
Yes.
All right, thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Oh, well,